For Inside Carolina, I'm Taylor Vippolis, and this is In the Trenches, where I'm joined by my fellow Carolina football lettermen, Mike Ingersoll and EJ Wilson. Guys, Saturday, it's hard to put it into words, but Saturday was wild. North Carolina escaped Boone with a 63-61 win over App State in a game that had a little bit of everything except for defense. EJ, I feel like you're going to be the star of this podcast, so let's get right into it. What were your thoughts?
I think I guess I'll start off with a little bit of the positive, which isn't actually a positive. The positive is really the play that we've kind of been seeing out of Kemon Rucker. The negative of that is, why aren't we seeing more of this guy? Why isn't this guy a part of the starting lineup? I was taking notes as I was watching the game, and I remember on one play, he set the edge so well on that stretch play that had been killing us all game that it's like, why aren't we seeing more of this guy? He's playing this play and playing the technique of the edge player, defensive end, outside linebacker, whatever you want to call it. He's playing it to a T, and we're being productive as a defense when he's out there. Other than that, that's probably the most positive thing I have to say. Other than that, it really was just a show of a lack of discipline. I feel like you can just take some of our old pods from a couple of years ago and insert some of the things that we were saying about the defense then, because they're going to be some of the same things that I'm going to say today. Bad angles, missed tackles, lack of physicality, lack of assignment. You got guys running free in the secondary. You have you just have the running plays that we were so excited about stopping last week, and now you see a program that really has a high caliber of talent and a team that really puts an emphasis on the run, and you see how that kind of turned out. We didn't. You won't hear me say that we were very impressive against the run today, but at the end of the day, we came out with the win. I think that we got very lucky in a lot of spots. We also shot ourselves in the foot on a lot of plays, too. The lack of discipline that we showed on a couple of third and long plays, they're back-to-back on the same drive I don't know what to say. Like I said before we came on, I'm kind of flabbergasted, and I don't really know how to be as PC and as entertaining to describe what I saw on that field yesterday, other than we lucked up and we won a game. So let's go ahead and talk about what we saw so we can move on and hopefully see a better showing against our next opponent, man.
Yeah, against Florida A&M, we left that game wondering maybe Carolina has a run defense, and that was answered Saturday to a resounding no, with App State rushing 6.7 yards per carry, kind of getting whatever they wanted. Mike, a lot more positive coming from you, I'm assuming, since you're talking about the offense more, but what were your thoughts watching that game?
We scored 63 points. So I'm nitpicking. My biggest gripe, and I guess this is a nod to the defense, is just like I said all year last year, we got to score 60 points to beat people. It's not going to happen. And you're going to do it with a freshman quarterback? It's not going to happen. I don't care how good Drake Maye looks. That kid's out there, throwing his body around. At some point, it's going to catch up to him. College football is going to catch up to him. We got Georgia State, who can play, coming up. And then we got Notre Dame, who can definitely play. And, anybody watch that game last night? Notre Dame and Ohio State, Notre Dame can play, dude. And then we got Virginia Tech, and we got Miami after that. We got to clean a lot of stuff up offensively and defensively if we're not going to go, if we're not going to be, I'm assuming we beat Georgia State. I don't want to make too bold of an assumption there. But we might be 3-3 going into week 7. So, I just want to make sure that, we're all on the same page, that everything's not perfect. We score 63 points and we don't look great on the offensive side of the ball in some areas. Predominantly, what I thought was, I thought we were improving in, which was gap runs, but I still saw a lot of issues in backside penetration when we were running our gap scheme. So we ran a lot of power. You saw a lot of pulling guards, powers, counters, that sort of thing. We ran a lot of that. And oftentimes when those plays got blown up, it was blown up by somebody in the middle coming off the backside. Again, either off the back block, off a backside seal. It wasn't really so much coming off a frontside double team. It wasn't really coming off of, wasn't coming from the second level. It was defensive linemen that were making the play, or somebody slicing through a gap that should have been taken by somebody. It should have been covered by an offensive lineman. So I'm a little concerned that fundamentally we're missing something in our gap schemes. And if they're going to be a staple of our offense, a staple of our running game, We got to get that cleaned up because it's going to end up biting us real bad against a really good defense. Pass protection, I know we gave up some sacks, but, we also were on the field a ton. A lot of that was blitz pickup. It wasn't a ton of just getting whipped in our one-on-one assignments. It was, blitz pickup. It was, in twist, guys, their hips getting picked, same old. But I think for as many times as we threw the ball and as many times as we dropped back, I thought overall, despite whatever it was, 3 or 4 sacks, whatever they gave up after giving up none against FAMU, I thought overall it was a decent showing considering the volume of dropbacks we had in that game. So I'm not super concerned about pass protection. That's all stuff that can get cleaned up. It's the run game and specifically the gap scheme plays that I have an issue with right now.
Yeah, I agree with you that against a team like Notre Dame's of Notre Dame's caliber, this is an offense that it's gonna struggle against that better competition unless they start figuring things out. And I think a team like Notre Dame can expose you, where a team like Florida A&M, a team like App State, even a Georgia State is going to struggle in that regard. So I think the first real test for the offense will probably be that Notre Dame game when we kind of know what Carolina has moving forward. But I also agreed with your point that it's nonsensical that this offense needed to score 63 points to escape with a win.
Positivity pod, they can do it apparently. Or they can score 56 points because Bryson Nesbitt was responsible for one of them.
I want to defend Bryson Nesbitt for a second. The only way you lose that game is if he returns that. But in the moment when all 3 of those guys get decleated and you get the ball and you look ahead of you and there's nothing but space, I'm cribbing that too.
Yeah.
I'm taking that, I'm scoring, I'm celebrating, and then I'm coming back to the sideline and saying defense need one stop. need to not
you take that risk to make teaching tape like that, man.
Yeah.
Well, there's also basically no time on the clock either. So it's like how much damage can they really do in this tiny amount of time?
And with the defense,
have you seen our defense?
Yes, with the defense, the answer is a lot. But like that's something that's hard to process when you're running into the end zone. Like, oh wow, there's 30 seconds left. App State has one timeout, but our defense can't stop anything right now. And I'll tell you who was watching that game with his feet kicked up and grinning. It's Jay Bateman.
Yeah.
EJ. A lot of Carolina fans are stupefied after what happened in Kid Brewer Stadium. The defense somehow worse than last year. How do you begin to describe what we're seeing on this field where Carolina's checking in right now at 100 and somewhere in the 110s when it comes to total defense?
Oh, man, there are a laundry list of things. I mean, one, the penalties. Let's talk about the penalties. I mean, you want to talk about a group shooting themselves in the foot. I have a note right here. I think it was the 10th drive of the game. Going into that drive, the score was 49-35. We're playing great defense. I mean, honestly, we're coming off, I think, the first drive of the second half and the second drive of the second half defensively were probably the best 2 drives we put together all game. So we're still feeding off some of that momentum. We get them into a 3rd and long. Late hit on the quarterback, give them a first down. The very next 3rd and 10, pass interference on Tony Grimes, which was questionable because I mean, I'm a part of the group that believes that Noah Taylor did get a piece of that ball. Either way, I mean, we put ourselves in a position for that to even be called. So I think that's a bigger issue. So penalties really kind of killed us. I mean, so many pass interferences, so many mistakes that are easily avoidable. Second, the play action pass was just a thorn in our side yesterday. They had a couple of big gains on the play action pass. They saw it work. Next thing you know, their 2 touchdowns, 2 of their many touchdowns were off of play action passes. That's because that we really weren't doing anything with the run. Their offensive line knew that they were undersized. They knew that Hassick, which he did yesterday, was going to be throwing their offensive line all around the field, which ended up happening. How do you neutralize a defensive line that's obviously stronger than you? You make them run side to side, and you make them be disciplined. You make their linebackers play disciplined football, and you make them do what they had to do. And that's kind of what we saw yesterday. I mean, we saw the offensive linemen, and those guys are 280 pounds, so they're taking off and they're running sideways, and our defensive line and it's making those bad steps that you take. If you take one false step, if this guy's running and taking off, then you're already reaching, you're already beat. So we're doing things to overcompensate for that. One play where I saw where they had the reverse play where Noah Taylor was running out to the sideline and he chose to go under the block. Like that's infuriating to see. That's stuff that they teach in high school that you're not supposed to do. Your job as an edge player is to set that edge. So you have to do whatever you have to do to fight over the top of the tight end. So there are just a lot of things that I see that can be fixed. But overall, I mean, when you look at the talent that we have on that defense and when we do play the run, how well we do play it, but when the quick pass is always going to be there, when the play action pass is always going to be there, when a team can just get the ball on the edge of our defense and know they're going to have success, it's really hard to have any integrity to that defense. So, I mean, I can go on and on about some of the issues that we're seeing. But I'll say the thing that's most frustrating for me is that we're still seeing that we've seen through now 2 defensive coordinators, we've seen through 2 coaching staffs, is our inability to tackle consistently. You think about early on in the game where Cam Kelly makes an unbelievable play. He has his assignment. He goes out to make the tackle, but just doesn't finish. Next thing you know, the tight end doesn't touch the ground. He's running for another 15 to 20 yards. Like when I tell you that all the bad luck in the world happened to us yesterday, when you say that we escaped with the win, we really did escape with the win. If we play that game 5 more times, I'm not sure we win any more of them if the situation is exactly like it was yesterday. So I do think that Coach Bateman's probably somewhere right now just with a little twinkle in his eye saying that, hey guys, it wasn't necessarily the X's and O's that were the problem, because Coach Chiswick has definitely come in and he's definitely simplified things for these guys. And I'll say another thing that really bothered me is that I noticed early on in the game, well, something that initially bothered me early on in the game when they were adjusting and shifting the line, shifting their personnel, maybe taking that bunch that they had moving into the other side of the line of scrimmage. We weren't adjusting as well, and they always were getting chunk yards on those plays, 7, 8, 10 yards. But one thing that we didn't see last year that we are seeing now is these adjustments that are being made on the fly, the adjustments that are being made at halftime. It's like I said, it's just I don't think the X's and O's are the problem. I think that we just are making some mental mistakes. We're making some discipline mistakes that no coaching staff or no amount of film study is going to fix that. You just have to want to fix that. So, and I think that's what's the most discouraging of all. If these guys if they were out here playing their hearts out, playing disciplined football, and they were just in bad position schematically, I think it'll be a little bit more encouraging to think that some of this could be changed. But I just feel like we've been talking about the same thing for this defense for so long. I mean, I actually got PTSD when Mike said that the offense has to score 60 points, because this is the 3rd season in a row that we said that. So it's just more of the same, but this time it's a little bit worse because, well, I mean, the talent that we have out there, there's no reason why we shouldn't be, why our defense, I expected them to be a dominant unit, but right now they don't even look serviceable. And I hate to be that harsh, but I mean, it is what it is.
Positivity pod.
Exactly.
LOL.
That's as positive as I can make it.
I do want to make this point, and I said this last year. I noticed it about Dez Evans, and I saw it again yesterday. That kid, whether he's making plays or not, I don't know that in terms of what's going on in film study and what's the day after the game, whether he's getting chewed for missed assignments and whatnot. But what I do know is that he's got something he can't teach, and that's effort. Mm-hmm. Dez Evans plays really hard. Mm-hmm. He's chasing down plays. He's trying to stand guys up and stalemate them at the line of scrimmage. He's trying to do the right thing. I mean, I don't see Dez Evans taking plays off. Like I want to go ahead and give him some credit to the extent any of this messaging gets back to any players,
Oh yeah.
EJ, to Vip, we hear the stuff in the locker room. I want people to know that I think Dez Evans plays really, really hard, and that's something that should be emulated by the rest of that team. And I think it is. I mean, you got guys like Rucker play real hard. I think Noah Taylor plays really hard too. I mean, whether he's making mistakes or not, I don't think it's an effort issue,
exactly.
Which is something you can't teach across the board. But one guy that definitely, Rucker always stands out to me, but one guy that continues to stand out from last season and into this season, and particularly yesterday, is Dez Evans. I saw him chase a play down from the opposite side of the field to the other sideline and make the tackle. It might have actually been that play the tight end broke, where he broke the tackle. Mm-hmm. It may have been that play. But I saw Dez Evans making that play 25 yards down the field. And for a defensive end outside linebacker type that's down on the line of scrimmage, coming opposite field to make that play, I think that says a lot about his character and who he is.
Oh, definitely. And one thing that I have to say, and I've had a note since to mention this in the last couple pods, him with his hand in the dirt has been a big difference in his play from last season.
He's
and what
bigger
we've
too. He
seen.
put on some size.
Oh, without a doubt, and I think more so he was. I mean, this is naturally who he was going to become. I think that he was trying to maybe stave off some of that weight and changing some of his technique because he was playing more of a stand up defensive end. But now he's playing more of that position where he's naturally played in high school. Now he's playing a lot more downhill. There's not that hesitation step or thinking too much because he's standing up. He knows that his job is to set the edge. His job is to make effort plays. He's not thinking as much. He looks like that guy that was one of the top players in the country now. I mean, we saw flashes of it last year, but like you said, it looks like he was confused and overthinking it sometimes. And now it definitely seems like he's starting to put it together. So, I mean, I do think that he's going to be one of the leaders on that defense. And honestly, like you said, I think with him and Kimon Rucker on the edges, with Noah Taylor coming in on some pass rush situations, I do think that could be an answer to some of the issues that we're having out on the edge, because those guys are really can be bookends for us. But definitely hats off to Dez and how he's kind of taken his game and his physical stature and improved it to be a better player this year.
Yeah, for the Carolina defense, it was 16 missed tackles, 3 from Cedric Gray, 3 from Cam Kelly, 2 for Javari Ritzy, 2 for Gio Biggers. Somebody like Ra Dilworth comes in, doesn't make a tackle, but misses the tackle on App State's first touchdown. So a lot to be cleaned up from the Carolina defensive perspective.
Ra made some plays on special teams, though. Should give him that.
Yeah.
Give him that nod.
But from an offensive perspective, what is it? About 70% of offense in football is hoping to figure out that you have a quarterback. It seems like North Carolina has a quarterback in Drake Maye. Mike, he plays really well against Florida A&M, but in his first road start, he goes into a hostile environment and he delivers again, completes 68.6% of his passes, 352 passing yards, 5 total touchdowns. Carries the team to a win when all hope looked dead and gone pretty early in that game. How do you begin to put into words what we're seeing from Maye?
I mean, I said yesterday in a private text message to somebody that Carolina should self-impose a death penalty and Drake Maye should transfer. I mean, that's how well the kid was playing. I mean, I say that completely joking. I love my program. Please, Drake, stay. Don't go anywhere. He's playing great. I mean, I don't know that he's Sam Howell 2.0, but I'll tell you what, he sure does look poised. He looks extremely mature out there. It didn't look like the moment was too big for him. I mean, being a North Carolina kid, being a Charlotte kid, App State and Carolina each have a pretty big fan base and alumni contingent, in the area in which he grew up. So, the hype around this game, I don't think was lost on him, and it didn't look like it affected him in a negative way. It may have, in fact, helped him play kind of out of his mind for that game. I mean, he's doing a good job to take care of the ball. We saw that one fumble. I think he's trying to make a play, and he did make a play. He's got to learn how to hang on to the ball there. That's just, ball security is something you learn through taking hits and losing the football. I mean, look at Tiki Barber. He's the case study for how to fix ball security issues. Sometimes you don't really understand how to properly carry a football, how to protect it in traffic until, you got live bullets coming and you actually drop a couple. So I'm not too concerned about that lost fumble. But in terms of interceptions and protecting the ball and knowing where to go with the ball, he clearly knows what he's doing. Now, we've had the one thing that did keep going through my mind is Carolina's offense, Phil Longo's offense, is maybe great for young quarterbacks, because one of the knocks on it, which ends up being a benefit for a young player, is that the reads aren't super complicated. That's one of the things you hear from scouts. It's one of the things you hear kind of rumblings under, whether they fixed it or not. But one of the complaints about, I know, Sam Howell in the draft process was that, a lot of scouts believed he had one read, and when that read wasn't there, he just had to bail. And that's how that offense was designed. That's actually beneficial for a guy like Drake, a young quarterback coming in, because, if he makes that read and then he teaches himself what maybe a secondary read is, we have enough athletes that are good enough to get open, and Longo's scheme gets guys open. As long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, you'll get open. You're handling your assignment, you'll be open. So it actually it's a system where a young quarterback like Drake can be very successful very quickly, which is what we're seeing. And I think that's that's going to be great moving forward as we further complicate the offense. We add some wrinkles in. I think those are things he'll be able to handle, if nothing else, because he's got the confidence for it. But I agree with you. I don't think the moment was too big for him. It's highly encouraging that we got a quarterback, that understands, for the most part, ball security, particularly when throwing the football, but can also just take off and make plays with his legs. I mean, he's sneaky fast and deceptive when he takes off running, and that's a huge benefit. Having that dual threat is a huge benefit for us, particularly in this offense. And as, again, he's still a new quarterback. We're breaking in a new quarterback. We're breaking in some new running backs, some new receivers, a patchwork, not a patchwork offensive line, but a new offensive line with some guys like Asim Richards who have been there, but several new players along that offensive line. It's a revamped offense. As we're breaking that in, having a guy who can scramble and make plays with his legs to buy time and to buy some breathing room and get first downs and keep drives going, I think that's exceptional for where he is in his career at this point. He started or he played in a couple games as a true freshman, without burning his red shirt, which gave him some game experience. But there's nothing like being the full-time starter. So this is really like all brand new for him. And it's really encouraging to see that he's playing well. App State is a good team. I've said this before. They're a great program. If my son got an offer to play at App State, I mean, that's the kind of place I'd be perfectly happy him going to play. They've always done things the right way. They put guys in the NFL. They've been successful for a long time. They really are the standard bearer in North Carolina for the past 20 years. And, we went out, we got a win against a really good program, and Drake played really well. And I thought the offense on the whole, you score 56 points, you're doing something right. Played well against a good program, Sun Belt or not.
Yeah, following Sam Howell and trying to live up to the shoes that he had in Chapel Hill was always going to be a seemingly tough task, but Maye looks like he's more than up for the challenge. And I think where he really differentiates himself from where like Sam was through 2 games is his ability to see the field and kind of distribute the ball a lot more evenly than somebody like Sam.
He does hit a lot of targets, and that's why, like, I don't want the criticism that I've heard. I'm not saying that I share this criticism, but just through the draft process with Sam, those are criticisms I heard of Longo's offense. I think you're exactly right. The ball distribution would not make you believe that there's one single read, and when that read's not there, you bail. Like, it looks like, I mean, Drake knows where his reads are, and he's getting the ball to different places, particularly tight ends, which is something we talked about last week. Tight ends, are going to continue, I think, to be a big part of this offense, and that's very beneficial for a young quarterback.
Yeah, and how much of that is Drake Maye being, 6'4" compared to Sam Howell, who's listed at probably 6'1", but he's probably not checking in at 6'1". But EJ, back to the defense. I want to, with how bad they started and how bad they finished, lost in the game was the UNC defense that held App scoreless for their final 2 possessions of the first half, and then shut out the Mountaineers in the third quarter. App
it's incredible how it really was a tale of like quarters. It was the first quarter and the fourth quarter for both the offense and the defense, right? And then the very middle of the game was a totally different football game.
App went about 31 minutes without scoring. Were there any redeeming qualities that you saw during that stretch that you thought, hey, maybe the defense can build on this?
Oh yeah. We consistently set a different line of scrimmage through that period of the game. I mean, that's when I think Ray woke up. That's when I think Javari Ritzie woke up, Miles Murphy, and all those big guys we have in the middle, who I honestly think can all be playing on Sunday one day. Those guys woke up. That's when you start to see a little bit more number 25 coming in, setting the edge. And as Mike mentioned, Dez Evans you were able to see some of the things he were doing more because everyone else was doing it as well. So yeah, we definitely got after the quarterback a little bit more. We only have 1 sack to show for it, but we definitely made him uncomfortable. Not as uncomfortable as you would think with him having 361 yards passing, but with just looking at the second and I'll say third quarters as a synopsis, that's the defense that I thought we would be seeing all season. The guys were flying around, they were making plays. We had some really good stops right there. We had some poor tackling and some plays there as well, but it wasn't as consistent theme as we saw on some of those drives in our 40-point fourth quarter, where we gave up probably 2 games worth of points. you start to see, I mean, you're seeing every back to penalties that were killing drives. You're seeing the missed tackles that were allowing a 5-yard run to be an 11 to 12-yard run. We didn't see that in this period, which kind of brings me back. Yeah, that was a positive, but that still kind of comes back to a negative. We aren't starting fast and we aren't finishing games. Against the App State, and this is no disrespect to App State. I think everyone, all three of us have a great deal of respect for App State, one for their reputation, as Mike said. I mean, that's a place where you want your kids to go because you know they're going to get a great education. You know they're going to play in a great football program, and if they're able, they're going to get a shot at the next level. So I'm not disparaging these guys' talent or anything else like that, but there's a reason why they're not a part of the ACC. And when you're playing against a school like a Notre Dame, when you have to play against an NC State, I mean, even a Duke, a Wake Forest, I mean, Pitt, all these teams that we're seeing in Miami, all these teams that are ranked that we have to see in the ACC, not starting fast and not finishing games it's not going to be 61-63. It's going to be 61-20 because these guys have athletes who are probably going to be first round draft picks. I mean, you look at the ACC's draft potential over the last few years, there is a lot of talent in the ACC. That talent's not the same type of talent that's at FAMU. It's not the same type of talent that's at App State. So yes, the microcosm of the middle two quarters was good, but we didn't start well. We didn't finish well, and that translates to a very poor conference season when you're playing against some of the talent we are in the ACC. So that's as positive as I can be for the positivity pod today about our defense.
You know what I started thinking as we got into the third quarter and they only had 21 points on the board, and we had stalemated them at that point. Like it looked like they were stifled. They might not score again for the rest of the game. We were going to keep piling. I thought that was going to be like a 56-21 game. That's where I thought we were going, and like they weren't going to score another point in the second half. That's where I thought that game was going to be. And the first thought I had was, here's Gene Chizik 2015 bend don't break defense. We gave up 21 points quick, and then they figured it out, and then they held them scoreless long enough for the offense to catch up and then pass them. Mm-hmm. That Ferrari of an offense that Phil Longo runs was finally able to get gassed up and to catch up with them and pass them. And I thought we're seeing 2015 all over again. And maybe this will be the theme. We're going to give up 14, 21, 28 points to teams that maybe, we shouldn't be giving up that many points to, but that'll probably, that'll be it. At some point, we'll put the lid on each team every game defensively. And then it's just going to be on the offense to go out and score points and make something happen, just like 2015. And then the fourth quarter happened. So I don't know what we're getting with Gene Chizik's defense right now. Again, it's first year. I mean, he's got to clean some stuff up, but the players are all still there. It's not like we have an import of all new players, and the new players we did get in, I would say added, to the wealth of talent that we have, along with some guys that are really experienced. You got Ray, Dez, Rucker, Miles Murphy. These are guys that have all played. I mean, they all have game experience. So Cedric Gray, I mean, Cameron Kelly. I mean,
Gio Biggers he had some really good plays. I mean, the guy has definitely made it. He's one guy that I'll say has made a vast improvement since last year as well. I really was impressed with some of the plays he was able to make yesterday. I mean, a lot of the guys did things we didn't want him to see, but as you mentioned, that experience that we have mixing with the new guys, I mean, it should be a recipe for success.
I mean, Vip, watching. I mean, EJ and I watch the trenches, right? You watch the outside. Tell me about Storm Duck. Like, what am I seeing from Storm Duck? Is this who he always was, and he just showed flashes and then got hurt, so we just remembered the good about Storm Duck? Or like what was it? Because I saw he gives up a touchdown, gets beat. He got beat a couple of times against FAMU. I don't want to throw the guy under the bus because those are just a couple of plays, and I don't know that he's not blocking dudes down every other play, and we're just noticing the bad, kind of like you do with offensive linemen, right? Like you only notice them when we give up a sack. You don't notice the 65 other plays where we had a guy completely locked down.
When Duck is healthy in like the 2019, early 2020 part of the schedule, I thought from what he was putting on the field, he was one of the best cover corners in the conference. But I think what you're seeing is a guy that has had such a hard time staying in and out. He misses parts of training camp. He misses parts of the regular season last year, where it's like it's hard, I think, for him to play consistently when he's not out there, and it's hard for the coaches to kind of count on him when he's not out there. And I don't think it's just a Storm Duck problem. I think it's a cornerback problem as a whole, where you have somebody like Tony Grimes, for example. He's a 5-star talent coming in. He's not
He's
playing
a
like a
freak
5.
physically.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he's a freak physically.
And
He's
so
not.
is Storm Duck.
He's
I
not
mean, Storm
playing
got
like a
bigger.
5.
I mean, he's a big.
Yeah,
I mean, that dude looks like a linebacker out there.
yeah. When you have a quarterback like Chase Bryce, no disrespect to Chase Bryce, but he has zero fear throwing at UNC's cornerbacks. When Bryson Nesbitt returns that kick, everybody in that building was like, App State is scoring because they're going to go after UNC's corners.
That's how I felt. Yeah, I felt the same thing.
And it was something like the UNC corners, they just put no fear in quarterbacks. They've put no fear in offenses. And I think it's a problem that Carolina has to look at because it's like you mentioned, it's not just Storm Duck. It's Tony Grimes. It's Legend Cavazos coming in and getting beat for 41 yards. The first play he's out there. It's a problem from top to bottom in that cornerback room. EJ, you said the UNC defense didn't finish well. It's an understatement.
Yeah.
It was a fourth quarter from hell. App State puts up 338 yards, scores 40 points. I was at Kid Brewer Stadium. I was on the sideline, on UNC sideline, like towards the end zone. That fourth quarter lasted, I checked my phone. That fourth quarter lasted an hour and a half. It got about 20 degrees hotter during that time. And I'm just thinking in my head, like, this implosion cannot be happening. The entire time I was like, when they missed the first 2-point, I was like, okay, let me go to the press box so I could start getting ready for
Air conditioning. So I go get ready for air conditioning.
So I could
People
start
don't
getting.
understand how hot it gets in Boone, especially in that stadium in the summertime. I remember in high school we had a team camp up there, and it was like cramp city. Like every one of us was like full body cramps every day. Like it was shockingly hot, and this was like in June. This is like June 2004 or something like that, or 2003. Yeah, it gets crazy hot up there.
Yeah, they missed the first 2-point, and I was like, all right, let me go inside. Let me start getting ready for whatever I have to do for the post game. Then as I'm walking, I see Bryson Nesbitt return the kick, and I'm like, I have to stay out here because App is scoring. The App is 1,000% scoring. They score, and I'm like, okay, they're going to get the 2-point conversion. But Noah Taylor holds on to Chase Bryce for dear life, and K'Mon Rucker comes from the other end to kind of clean it up. But Mike, I thought the positive for the Carolina offense outside of Drake Maye, you're without your best player in Josh Downs, doesn't play, injured, lower body injury, and you're watching the Tar Heels out there. It's Maye, it's George Pettaway, it's Caleb Hood, who had a huge breakout game.
Who always seems to play well no matter when we put him in the game.
Yeah.
And he has for a couple of years.
The sneaky play of the game was the Caleb Hood, like I think it was like a 3rd and 11. He catches it like 2 yards, spins out of the would-be tackler, keeps the drive going. I think that was when Carolina was down 21-7. So if they get stopped there, it could be curtains kind of for that team. You have somebody like Kobe Paysor who replaces Josh Downs, Bryson Nesbitt, JJ Jones, Gavin Blackwell. A lot of those players coming into this year, we really didn't know what Carolina had. And it's looking like you're getting a youth movement on the offensive side of the ball that just keeps producing. So how encouraging is that for you to see?
Well, it's encouraging because we didn't have it last year. You know, when we had guys go down, when we had primary options go down, we didn't have much there. When Josh Downs wasn't in the game, there really wasn't anybody else that was getting separation and making plays, unfortunately. That was just the reality of it, and our offense really struggled because of it. We know we didn't have the same running game, obviously, last year, so we really had to be pass heavy, and we just didn't have, for whatever reason, we just didn't seem to have pieces that were meshing in a way that created opportunities for Sam Howell to make big plays and for the offense to really put up the kind of points we had grown accustomed to seeing. I think we now have that. We have multiple options. You know, an injury here, an injury there may not be the death knell for the offense that week. Versus last year, Josh Downs goes down.
Shut it down.
It's curtains for, like you said, it's curtains for that offense for that week. Just shut it down. You know, it's going to have to be a defensive slugfest, which, you know, history tells us
we don't want that.
We don't want that. We haven't wanted that for about 10 years. So, you know, it's points or loss is what we're looking at. And I think we have an offense now where we don't necessarily have to worry about the offense much anymore. This, you know, at least for this season, that's what, you know, that's shades of Javonte and Michael Carter, you know, those teams. We're talking the 2019 team, right? You didn't really need to worry about the offense. You weren't super concerned with them. The 2020 team, you weren't super concerned with that offense. You knew they were going to put up some points. Last year was a different animal. I'm hoping we're sort of back to historically under Mac Brown, we can, we have an offense we can rely on. We have special teams that are good enough, and then it's just kind of, we're going to go as the defense goes.
Yeah, the three players from that group that I made a note to make sure that I shout out was it was Kobe Paysour, who enters the game replacing Josh Downs, 1 catch in his career for 7 yards going into the game. He's Carolina's leading receiver, 8 receptions for 92 yards. Caleb Hood, I mentioned, and you mentioned, Mike, he's a guy that when he's healthy and out there, he's a guy that always kind of produces, and somebody that he knows some Hampton's coming, Petaway's coming, and Hood is looking like a guy that can compete and go toe to toe with those guys, 4 carries in the backfield. And then somebody like DJ Jones, who all the running backs I just mentioned, it's kind of clear that those are going to be the guys from a backfield running perspective. But he comes in, when Carolina was struggling to move the ball late, it was because of the running backs in pass protection. You look at Pro Football Focus's grades from I think it was Petaway and Caleb Hood, their pass blocking grades, they're not good, borderline non-existent. And you have somebody like DJ Jones who you can put back in there. The one play that I'm thinking about, Drake Maye knows a free rusher's coming, and he basically just knows where DJ Jones is going to be downfield. DJ Jones catches it, puts Carolina up 56-49. Carolina doesn't trail from that point, even though
did we have 2 touchdowns on 2 cover 0 all out blitzes from them?
Yeah,
that was cover 0.
Yeah.
So we burned App State twice on cover 0, which if you're always gonna have somebody free or somebody's free on cover 0 when defenses run it. And if you can exploit that, now we've exploited it twice. That's the kind of thing that you keep putting that stuff on film, you'll stop seeing it. There's a reason they were putting it on film, is because last year some teams ran cover 0 against us and just crushed us. I mean, they were just running the old school LSU cover 0 all out. Like, teams just saw it. They put it on film. Every week it was working against us. We just kept seeing it. Sam was getting crushed. Our offensive line was getting crushed. Our offensive line is doing a good job of picking up their assignments and leaving just the 1 or 2 free rushers that are there by design. There's always going to be a free rusher by design in a cover 0. You just don't have the bodies to pick everybody up. But if you can exploit it the way that we did, and I think it was at least for 1 touchdown, it might have been for 2 touchdowns yesterday.
Yeah, I know for a fact they
cut that stuff out real quick.
Yeah, they hit Bryson Nesbitt on 1. I don't know if it went for a touchdown, but I think that kind of does speak to Drake Maye, 1, to be able to identify when you're going to get a cover 0 look and you're going to have a free rusher, and 2, it's tough to stand in that pocket knowing that you're about to take a hit. I think you kind of saw that the first App State 2-point conversion, where Chase Bryce knows defenders are coming and he rushes the throw. And it's the only reason we're not sitting here talking about a loss probably at this point was that small difference between having a quarterback like Drake Maye and then having a quarterback like Chase Bryce. But Mike, if there is a question mark on that unit still, it's probably the offensive line that'll be challenged when UNC gets to Notre Dame and it gets to the better defenses in conference play. They gave up 2 sacks, 5 hurries, and 8 pressures, according to Pro Football Focus, but that came exclusively from Spencer Rowland and Ed Montelis. Then UNC rushes for 6 yards per carry, a lot of big plays in the running game. George Petaway had a big shot. Caleb Hood had like a 71-yard rush.
Yeah.
As our resident O-line expert, how would you break down the offensive line play?
From a pass protection standpoint, our tackles are good and our center is real good. Like, they're playing much better. Austin Richards is playing night and day from what he was playing last year. Roland's a kid from Harvard playing right tackle.
Yeah.
Pass protection, he looks pretty good for the most part, despite what you just read off. On the whole, he's playing pretty good. He's a good right tackle for us. And our center, the kid from Miami, kid can play. He made a couple mistakes yesterday on the snap. But in terms of actual physical ability, I think all 3 of those guys are playing really well. And we know that Ed Montelis can play. Like, we know that. But my concern last year with our offensive line was interior pressure. That's the quickest way to the quarterback is through the defensive tackles and the guards. That's just It's the shortest distance. And that's where Sam was getting the bulk of his pressure last year. They were running basic twists inside. We were getting beat on that stuff. We are passing that stuff off a whole lot better. And I actually watched that specifically yesterday. I saw us pass off a couple of twists for big gainers, that it looked like we were about to get beat. And I saw the guards recover really well on some of those twists inside, and actually shut that stuff down pretty well. So if we're looking for positives, I think in pass protection, our pass protection is so much better than it was last year. It's not perfect, obviously. I mean, you don't give up sacks, you don't give up hurries, you don't give up hits if you're doing things perfectly. But like I said, if you're talking, what would you say? You said we had 5 hits, 8 pressures, 3 sacks. So that's 13. That's 15 times Drake Maye was contacted or nearly contacted in the pass game, and we threw the ball 40 times.
Yeah.
Okay, so 25 times it all worked out. You start cutting that down every single week, and you get it down to, very few hurries, very few pressures. Sacks are not people, unless you get up 6 or 7 sacks. 6 or 7 sacks says you got a real problem. 1 to 2 sacks in a game is not indicative of an offensive line issue. What you really need to look for is pressures and hurries. And hits. That's really what you need to pay attention to know if your offensive line's having a hard time in pass protection. We have improved in that area. 8 hurries, 5 hits. So 13 total dropbacks, resulting in some sort of disruption in the backfield with the quarterback because of the offensive line. That is less than we were getting most games last year.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound great, but that's an improvement. And we're talking 2 games in. The biggest jumps you make as an individual player, we talked about this last week, we've talked about it for years on this podcast, is between games 1 and 2. And then there's also a smaller but incremental jump between weeks 2 and 3. And right around week 4, week 5, you know who you're going to be as a player that season. You've basically worked out the early season kinks. You've gotten accustomed to game speed, and the skills and the fundamentals that you have, they are now being implemented at full speed. So by week 4, we'll know the offensive line that we really have. I will say that, FAMU was a test. I think we played well against them, but App was the real test. I'm excited to see what the jump is between this App game and Georgia State. And then I would still say that I think Georgia State isn't going to be the test that we need it to be early in the season. There might still be improvement happening between Georgia State and Notre Dame, and then Notre Dame to Miami. So we might have a little bit of a lag here just because of the slightly easier schedule that we're running early here in the season. Like, we're not opening up with an LSU, in Atlanta, or South Carolina in Charlotte, or a big, or Georgia down in Atlanta. We're not opening up with a big marquee game against a huge Power 5 opponent who's equally as skilled, if not more, than we are up front. You'll see those jumps and you'll kind of know what you have sooner. I think because of the lag in terms of easier schedule early on, we may be going deeper into the season. We might be looking at game 5 before we really know what we have on the offensive line. But I would expect to see more improvement between this week and this coming weekend. And then between Georgia State and Notre Dame, you'll still probably see a little bit of an improvement jump. And we'll know pretty soon what we have, but it is better than we had last year in pass protection. In terms of the run game, it's the things I've been harping on beginning of this podcast, last week, and even last year. In our gap scheme stuff, we're having in the run game, we're having some issues inside. We're having issues on back blocks. Guys are making plays off what should be the back block. Guys are making plays off of double teams. We're not getting up on the second level. And making a play in a double team is kind of like, EJ, I know Jason Staples talked to you about this, what he saw from Javari Ritzy last week. Him and I talked about it at length, but for a defensive lineman, you can make a play as a defensive tackle, as a 3 technique on a double team, even a defensive end. If it's tight end tackle, double team up to a will linebacker like in power or something, you can make the play by just getting skinny and eliminating surface area for that offensive lineman, for that second offensive lineman in the double team, to actually get his hands on and be able to root you out. If you're able to get skinny, eliminate surface area, and keep those 2 offensive linemen occupied and off of that second level, you've made a play as a defensive lineman in that double team. I still see a lot of that happening to our offensive line. I see defensive linemen preventing us between FAMU and now App State from getting up on the second level, which is affecting our gap scheme plays. I think in our zone running concepts, I think we're actually playing pretty well. We seem to get that, but our gap scheme stuff, which continues to me to appear to be bread and butter of this offense. It's where Phil Longo wants to go. It's the identity they want to have in running the ball, that power downhill 4 or 5 yards, 4 or 5 yards, 4 or 5 yards, 4 or 5 yards, break one for 60, 70 yards like we saw with Hood. That's the identity I think they want to have in the running game. And if that's the case, they're going to have to really fix those gap scheme fundamentals. And it's all happening on the inside. It's not your single blocks on the outside. And really, when they're getting to the second level, they're doing an okay job once they get there. The problem is they're not getting there enough.
Yeah, the blocking grades from Pro Football Focus back up everything you basically just said. Carolina is significantly better in pass blocking than they are in run blocking. You have an offensive line essentially played the entire game. Awesome Richards, Ed Montelis, Corey Gaynor, William Barnes all played 73 snaps. Spencer Rowland played 69 snaps, got hurt late. Adorno comes in at right guard. You kick Barnes
out to right tackle.
Out to right tackle. And then you have, in terms of, they were all pretty average run block grades. Not good, not great. I mean, not bad, not good. But then pass blocking, you have Awesome Richards, 86.8, elite grade. William Barnes, 85.5, good grade. Corey Gaynor, 83.0, really good grade still. So
as a center, that's a really good grade. I mean, folks need to understand, like centers, centers, you don't do a lot. You have a lot of help. You got help, you got help from both guards. Typically, pass protection's usually easier at the center spot, but once in a while you're one-on-one, and that's hard as a center. So if he's got an 83 grade, that's actually pretty good for a center. Yeah.
And EJ, one of the biggest things I learned from playing football is that you never want to make a blanket statement like the entire defense was bad, because it's unfair to the players that did play well. You look at Pro Football Focus's grades. Rive Hassick grades out as Carolina's best defender. He gets
block him, man.
He gets a really good grade, 82.0.
He was held like crazy.
Yeah, 82.0, great grade for him. Noah Taylor has his moments, plays with a high motor, came on Rucker's motor on his sack and on the second 2-point play, tracking it down.
I don't know. I mean, he does everything right. He needs to be on the field more.
He needs to be a starter.
Yeah. And I really don't like to be the person who's like, you have to play football to kind of understand what's going on. Because I think there's a ton of people who didn't play football that can see the game in ways that, some people don't. But the Carolina fans who are like, we need to play Rive Hassick less to play some of these young guys.
No.
Rive Hassick is the best defender on this Carolina team right now.
It has been, I think, since Chaz left. And that's, if you want to talk about a bold blanket statement, Rive Hassick is the heart and soul of our defense. There's a reason why I refer to him as Rive or Havoc. The guy, I mean, and I'll take it even a step further. I mean, I follow the guy on Instagram, and you never see him post anything about himself, but as soon as something happens for his teammates, it is all over his social media. So, I mean, and that's one, like, that right there kind of tells you who this guy is. That guy's not out there. I mean, I saw one pass rush play yesterday, and I was like, I don't know who this guy is or where this has been, but just his ability to kind of convert from the run to the pass. He's playing the run on the way to the quarterback, because he's basically sitting the center or the guard or whoever in the running back's lap every time the play is happening. No, you don't. You don't put the other guys on the field in place of him. You put the other guys on the field with him, because he's going to take up 2, sometimes 3 blockers, and that allows those athletic guys to just run around and play football. He's making the defense so much easier for everyone else that if he wasn't on the field, I don't think we win that game yesterday, because a lot of those plays that could have been long gainers, maybe he didn't make the tackle, but he stopped a 5-yard play from becoming a 15-yard play down the middle of the field. So I do think that with line play, like Mike kind of alluded to earlier, I mean, unless you really have been around the game, and I won't even say play, I'll say been around the game to appreciate some of the kind of the B-roll, it'd be a B-level player or B-level actor to anyone outside of the game. But if you really watch the game, you know that the offensive linemen and the defensive linemen are kind of what make the offense and the defense go. So None of some of these things just, I mean, you're not seeing the Cedric Gray and Power Echols get to run around and use their athleticism the way they do if Ray isn't keeping them clean.
Yeah.
So no, I don't, if I'm having I'm not a rude person, but if I'm having a conversation with someone and they say Ray needs to play less, then that conversation's over.
Yeah.
This is a Hassick's America now, boy.
The Carolina defense is waking up today looking for a lot of answers, and I can promise you the one answer isn't going to be play Rive Hassick less.
Not at all. Not at all. Not unless you want to double up that 60 when we play Notre Dame.
And this question's for
is Ray a 60-year senior now?
He's got to be.
So he's one of the few guys I've seen. There's a lot of 60-year players you see around the country, and I don't see them increasing their draft stock. Through 2 games, Ray has increased his draft stock, which I think was decently high considering where he came from, right? Yeah. The fact that he had draft stock in the first place, given that, you know, he was a relatively unknown guy, completely unknown guy when he first took the field a couple of years ago. He's using his 6th year to actually increase his draft stock and make himself some money. I hope he keeps it up because, you know, this is where, like, someone who's taking advantage of having a Chacos year, shout out to Chacos year in college, like really taking advantage of it and making himself potentially a pretty special future, at least in the short term.
Yeah, he's listed as a grad student, and this is already his 4th year at Carolina after
he's gonna be a professor by the time the season's
over. After transferring in.
Listen, that's Professor Vohasek.
But this is the last question, and it's for both of you. Mike, you could answer it first, but Mac Brown always talks about how it's easier to get coached harder when you win a game because the mood in the Keenan Football Center, it's a lot more positive, and you can be a lot more tougher. You can be more tough on these players. Is that something you noticed from your playing days, that it was easier to be coached harder when you won and you were feeling better?
Yeah, I mean, in a general sense, sure. I mean, me personally, like I'm a you know, thrill of victory, agony of defeat. I'm an agony of defeat guy. Like I consider winning, like that's what you're supposed to do. I never got too excited about winning. It's when we lost that I really, you know, losing was far worse to me than winning was joyful to me, if that makes any sense. So being coach, I expected criticism and wanted criticism no matter what, me personally. But I will say that when you win, you're watching the film knowing this ultimately ends in something good. Even if you do a couple bad things on film, you know, it doesn't affect the outcome of the win in the end. Whereas in a loss, it's like, well, did I cause it? Like, was this the thing that did it? Or was this the thing that contributed to the slide that ultimately did it? So you're constantly questioning yourself watching that film, you know, after a loss. So there is some truth to that. I think it's, you know, the mood is better. I mean, just psychologically, of course, he's right. It's easier to take harder coaching after a win. I think the difference is, do you want the harder coaching all the time, win or loss? And I don't know what this team's makeup is, but I will say that, you know, they offensively, they grinded out a 2-point win, and they had to score 63 points to do it. I mean, both teams covered the over by themselves. They could have shut the other team out and still covered the over
in the fourth quarter.
And in the fourth quarter, this was the easiest game. If you were a bettor and you were taking the over, this was the most comfortable game you've ever had. I mean, you just could have sat back and cracked open a beer and just enjoyed it for the first time maybe ever. The offense grinded out a hard win. Like you literally had to score over 60 points to win this game, and they figured out a way to do it. Had some help from Nesbitt on special teams, but they still found a way to do it. That should make you feel good. You know, it should make the criticism hit a little less, you know, a little weaker. The criticism shouldn't hit you as hard, knowing you just put in the work to grind that out on the road. A true road win. Charles Arbuckle kept talking. It was a friend of mine, kept talking through the broadcast. He was one of the commentators about how this was, you know, assuming it was going to be a win, the first true road win for Carolina in quite some time.
Yeah.
Offense should feel good about that because they really did carry it. It should make the film study a little bit easier, even with some of the mistakes.
Yeah, it was the last road win for Carolina since the Javonte Williams, Michael Carter game down in Miami. Yep. It's been that long for Carolina. EJ, it's a defense that probably feels like they let the team down yesterday or Saturday when people are listening to this. It's a defense that felt probably helpless at times going up against App State. But from your playing experience, do you think now that it is easier for the players to get coached hard, seeing that at the end of the day, Carolina went back to Chapel Hill and the perfect record's still intact?
I don't think that it's going to be comfortable at all, whether this was a win or a loss, because of some of the mistakes that they made. It's easy to go in when it's a lot easier to go in when the mistake that you're making is, oh, I may have missed this one tackle, or I may not have pressed this gap the way I was supposed to, or I may not have worked my technique off, or I may didn't counter on this pass rush move and allow them to have too much time. That's a little bit different to when you're looking at film and saying, oh my God, look at that late hit, or look at me being out of position. Look at me whiff and miss this tackle. Look at me getting reached on this block. I mean, because they're going to be getting coached up on the things that they've been getting coached up on since they began to play football. So it's a little bit tough. I mean, when you talk about games like some of the heartbreaks that we had last season, where we really put together some defensive efforts, win, lose, or draw, those are going to be. You walk into the film study room with an even keel. You take your bumps and bruises from the coaching staff. You learn from it. You move on. That was always my attitude, win, lose, or draw, was just to try to have an even keel about it, to try to go in and say, okay, there's some things I can improve upon and take away whether I won or I lost, because I don't want to give myself an excuse. You don't want to, like Mike said, like there's a lot more pain in losing than there is thrill in, I guess, winning. And I think that's probably one, our makeup, and two, is just kind of being a student of the game. When you watch as much film as I did, and I mean, I always felt like I had a chip on my shoulder, so I had to be the smartest guy out there to play on the field, because there were going to be some guys who were going to be physically more talented than I was. So I took that film study personally, and that was kind of my time to improve. I mean, I've done everything all summer to get my body together. Now it's time to get my mind right, get my technique right. So win, lose, or draw, always went into the film study thinking that I had something to learn. And I wanted my coaches to coach me hard, no matter what it was. I wanted to have that level of consistency, so it didn't feel like they were piling on me when things were bad, and I didn't want them to not tell me what I needed to hear when things were going good. So. But yeah, this group's not going to have a fun time in film study.
I love a point you made where after the game yesterday, I see Mac Brown dancing in the locker room, and I'm like, man, I really miss football. I really miss the atmosphere of being around all the guys, but I'm not jealous of the defensive players in the film room on Sunday.
Those guys were out of that video. They were in the back getting their IVs and Gatorade.
They were on the bus already.
Exactly. Yeah, they were already eating their Bojangles or Dominoes or whatever they're giving the guys now, man. Those are one of those ones where I'm going straight to class and back until the next game. And there really were situations like that. I remember we played Clemson my freshman year. We lost 63-9, and I don't think anyone saw me on campus that wasn't in my class, that didn't have a class with me for like a week, man.
Yeah, it's such a contrast between the offense and the defensive players, how they're probably feeling today. I was joking with the basketball player Justin Jackson, because he was close with Luke Maye, and how after Luke Maye hit the shot against Kentucky, everybody was tweeting pictures of Luke Maye showing up to his class at 8 a.m. And we were saying Labor Day tomorrow, Drake Maye might just show up to an 8 a.m. class, and even if he's not in the class, Drake Maye is going to show up just to get some applause.
I would.
And it's a stark contrast between how him and the defensive players are feeling today. But that's all we have.
I was watching the Arkansas game.
Yeah.
What a good day of college football yesterday, too. If
Yeah.
you watch any of those games yesterday, there was a lot of good games, including ours. I mean, just wild games. I was watching an Arkansas game. Look, I'm not saying Jacoby Criswell is going to transfer. I'm not saying he's doing nothing, but I would think that if he left, he'd want to go back home to Arkansas and play with Sam Pittman in Arkansas. If that were to happen, we really need to have a conversation with Sam Pittman about what's going on in that quarterback room, because I saw Malik Hornsby, Cade Fortin on that roster already. If you added Jacoby Criswell there, I mean, that's basically UNC's quarterback room, or would-be quarterback room, for the last 5 years, and they're down there in Arkansas. Like, what's going on down there? Did you notice that?
We both know Coach Pittman well, and we know the type of charisma that guy has, man.
He's raiding Chapel Hill.
He's scouting the UNC room.
I saw Cade Ford and I was like, is that Cade? I saw Ford on the back of a jersey and a number 10. I'm like, is that Cade Ford? And then the camera panned on his face, like, that's Cade Ford, who, by the way, I thought was always a pretty good player. I mean,
Yeah.
he showed me some stuff.
The way we feel towards Arkansas is how Ohio State feels towards us, where all the players that want to leave Ohio State, Antonio Williams, the defensive lineman, his name's escaping me right now, Cohen, I think, Legend Cavazos. If you can't make it at Ohio State, come on down to Chapel
Or if you
Hill.
know Ruggles and you couldn't make it at Carolina, you go to Ohio State.
You go the opposite.
Yeah, and become a star.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because before we end this podcast, I wanted to shout out Noah Burnett. That was not a talked about storyline coming out of training camp, that Carolina was going into the season with a new kicker. And for you watch the ECU game and you could see how quickly a kicker can have nightmare scenarios. And
that kid at ECU's
they
got
were
a
at
leg.
home.
I mean, he can play.
Yeah, he has a leg and they're at home. Noah Burnett goes on the road in Boone. He knocks down his first field goal attempt, 47, plenty of leg on it, straight down the middle. And then he comes in again, 41 from 41. But I'm glad we did get the Noah Burnett mention, because I also wanted to make a note of that. But that's all we have for this week. Saturday, Carolina plays Georgia State in Atlanta. It's a 12 p.m. game on ESPNU. It's the second of back-to-back road games against the Sun Belt. Carolina looking to clinch their share.
Sun Belt. Yeah.
Clinch their share of the regular season Sun Belt title. Guys, it was a pleasure today, and appreciate everybody for tuning in and listening.
For sure.
Yep. Good to see you guys.